Welcome to the December Board of Trustees meeting, everyone. Would you join me in our board meeting and we stand?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Two fingers.
We have a verification of a quorum. Everybody's present. And I don't know that there are any guests that have signed up to speak. So let's move on to the minutes review. If everyone had a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting, and if so, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I did get an opportunity to review the minutes. I'd make a motion to approve them.
A second.
Meyer seconds it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. And we have a opportunity for public comment, but nobody has signed up for public comment. So we'll move on to an always enjoyable part of the meeting, which is celebrating success. And tonight, Al Williams is making a presentation. Al?
Welcome. Members of the board, Dr. Joe, thank you for allowing me to talk about our programs. It's always nice to brag about NIC athletics, and I always tell our student athletes, whenever you get a chance, make sure you talk proudly about our programs. So again, thank you for inviting me. I was kind of going through a few notes just to talk about information on our programs tonight, and I happened to come across an old program from 05-06. We were bragging about what a year it was. And I was looking at the accomplishments back then, and at that point, we were so proud of just being regional champions. And now you fast forward to 2012, and here we are, we're not talking about regional championships. If we would have had these same accomplishments right now, we would have been saying it was an off year for us. Just looking at where we are right now, I'll give you a little brag list right now. Starting from the bottom up, we were 18th in the nation for women's soccer this year. We're currently ranked 18th for women's golf. We are currently ranked 13th for men's basketball. We're 14-1. We are currently ranked number 10 for men's golf. We were number 1 at one point in the nation for volleyball, and we finished 8th in the nation. We are currently number 1 for wrestling, and our only loss is to a four-year school. And we are currently number 1 in the nation for women's basketball. So of our 9 intercollegiate programs, 6 are nationally ranked, and I would be disappointed if we didn't go back to the national tournament for at least 6 of these teams. Softball's not included yet. They're going to have a good year, but it just shows how far the programs have come. And when you mention the teams that are in the top 20 for all these sports, I'm even more proud of what they did in the classroom this past year. Every team that got recognition or is currently being ranked was either academic All-American team last year, or they had a 3.0 cumulative GPA for their programs. So when we talk about the overall accomplishment, they do put the student and the student athlete. Overall GPA for the program is 2.95, and we had 7 individual academic All-Americans and 14 members of our program on the Dean's List. But on the field, we talk about what they do on the field, court, or mat, but equally, I'm proud of what they do in the community. We talk about being community citizens, and the accomplishments that they've done are equally as impressive, in my opinion. And annually, we participate in the Race for the Cure. Our women's basketball team runs our softball program. They wear T-shirts with members of the community that are involved with the softball program with their names as survivors. Our basketball team is out there giving high five as they come across the finish line. And people always come back and say what an encouragement that is for them to come across and see our athletes out there. Our wrestling team, for years, in honor of Shirley Parker, who's a member of the community, long-term member of the community, who passed away, the Parker Toyota family. In honor of her, they have the reading program. And for the last 10 years since I've been here, they've read to every first grader who come through our program in this community and give them all a book. And this past year, they awarded their 10,000th book to the first graders in this area. But in addition to that, they also raise money for local charities, and they sell these We Care t-shirts. It's not often you see wrestlers wearing pink, but they sell these t-shirts. All the proceeds go to a local charity. This past year, they raised $2,000 alone just from selling t-shirts to give back to the Susan G. Komen Foundation for breast cancer awareness. Then you see our volleyball program, and they also contribute. They're out there at Habitat for Humanity, and I get pictures every year where they're out there contributing and help building for homes and community to show that they are interested not just in receiving, but giving back to our community. So when I talk about celebrating success, I really am proud to be in front of you and say that where we were in 2005, we talked about what a year. I think we can look back now and say, in credit to our coaches, what a program. So thank you for allowing me to give my comments on my programs this night. Any questions?
Are there any questions, Bill?
Just a comment. Mr. Williams, I've known you for a long time, and you're a class act. And we are blessed to have somebody with your leadership. Leadership doesn't just happen. Leadership and the success that they've done is through efforts, and we appreciate that. And something that a lot of leaders of our athletic programs don't do is focus on how much important it is to give back, and thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Any other
Mr.
comments?
Chair,
Yes.
I'd certainly agree with Mr. Nielsen, and we're so proud of our student athletes and proud of our program. Thank you for a great talk tonight to bring us up to date.
Thank you. And I do want to thank our coaches, too. They do a great job, and they are ambassadors for our community, and I really am proud of what they do, and we look forward to having some national success in the winter. So come out and watch some ball games.
Al, before you sit down, I wanted to ask you, I had the privilege to go to your tri-state wrestling tournament last weekend. And you talked about your teams and you talked about the athletic programs that are offered here at NIC, but you do more than that. Obviously, this tri-state tournament is a great success. I mean, I talked to the wrestlers and the coaches that were there, and they all look forward to it and say it's the best wrestling tournament in the area. And apparently, there's the winners qualify for national programs. Could you talk to us a little bit about some of the programs that don't involve necessarily our teams?
Well, there's several programs, and you mentioned Tri-State. That's the largest wrestling tournament in the West. We have over 50 schools that were invited this year. We could have many more than that, but our gym, as you know, only holds so many, and we really could use a facility to expand upon that. But to win Tri-State, which is now 4 states and even more, it's Washington, Idaho, Oregon, and Montana, where the primary schools come from, but a school came up from Arizona. But it's tougher to win Tri-State than it is win their own state tournament. And the kids really cherish the opportunity to compete in this because they realize that if you can win Tri-State, you really are the best in the Northwest. This has been the 43rd year we've had this tournament. And again, we used to have over 60 teams. It's just grown so much that we have to actually turn teams away. If we had the facilities to expand this, we could easily have 100 teams out there. And when you do this, we do this on a marketing basis to show potential students what our campus is all about. And they look forward to coming here every year, and they don't mind being here in cramped quarters just to compete because they like coming to our campus, they like the feel of the tournament, the competition, but they really like being here in Coeur d'Alene and seeing that community support, and I think that's what really brings all the teams back, and not just for this tournament, but for our clinics and camps we put on for our programs. They like coming back here to this area, and just unfortunate we don't have the facilities that really could expand our programs for this. I'm glad you mentioned that other thing as far as opportunities we provide. A program we had a couple of weeks ago for the special needs games that we provided, Cal DeHaas, who was one of our coaching members, also instructor here, put on a special needs games, which for students from 18 to 40 who were out there playing a basketball game. And for them, this really was like an NBA All-Star game for them. Got the chance for them to play in front of a crowd, and they got the bands that come out from Coeur d'Alene High School and Post Falls cheerleaders and the Stomp Band from Lake City. And these kids got the chance to really be on display and show what they could do. And it was such a thrill for these athletes to come out. And the pictures that came from that event really showed that this really was a special one for them, but their families as well. And I think we'll be doing this for an annual event for years. I'm so glad Cal brought this to our campus, and it just expands what we do for the community. And it really was a special one for us and the fans and the people in the audience and the family members. And I get more comments on that event than we'd have for any event we've had in the last 5 years.
I was fortunate enough to hear Cal's report on that at the Booster Club meeting, and he had brought some of the athletes with him, and it was, and then, of course, they had some family with them too, but it was interesting to hear their stories and how it touched them and how much they enjoyed it, and to hear some of those young athletes in that group, well, I don't know, young teens, 20s.
40s.
40s,
Yeah.
yeah. And what it meant to them.
And it really was a special event. I'm glad we had a good turnout. I think it'll be even bigger next time, because those that missed it are hoping we do this again. And you can't thank Cal enough for just thinking of those fans that never get a chance to be on display like they were that night. And the pictures were just amazing. So thank you for bringing that up.
Al, thank you very much for your efforts, and thank you very much. And make sure you pass on our congratulations to all the teams in their endeavors.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Thank you very much. Our next report is from RGU. Lori? You don't look like Lori.
We flipped a coin who had to speak, and so that's me. I'm Robert from RGU. Lori's also here tonight, and I'll get the slideshow going, but Dale Hickman, who's we're associated with on the project from H2A, is also here tonight. Hopefully I get this going right. Just to give you everybody a little background, there's a lot of people here tonight. We were hired to look at what professional tech is here at NIC and what are the future, placement of buildings, leases, all those kind of options. Just to give you a background to where we're at today. We've completed the programming effort with the staff and faculty. First we took the faculty and looked at some newer facilities so they could get an idea what's out there. A lot of times when you're isolated to a lab, you don't get to see what's new in the field, and just to help expand their minds. Then we sent out some questionnaires, asked them what they liked, what they disliked, what they needed. Those questionnaires were really good for us to start for a basis, which I'll go over with. And then we've been creating the programming for the labs. We've asked the instructors to look a little bit into the future and what they would see primarily down the road as a full-grown program, or what it could be, not to say that it wouldn't be narrowed down now, but what they would like to see here in the future at NIC. And so we're here tonight to give a presentation on that. If anybody has any questions about what I'm talking about, because you might not be familiar with it, go ahead and ask a question or something, and I don't want to lose somebody if they have a question or something, so don't feel free to interrupt me. First of all, as you go through, primarily the programming here that I'm going to go about tonight is basically the lab spaces, is where the students go and do their hands-on participation, and then there will also be a classrooms involved for classroom instruction, and then the instructors will always also have an office. One of the concepts we've looked at here is typically in professional tech facilities, the classroom and offices associated with the lab, adjacent to the lab, but we found it beneficial in some of the other programming efforts that we've done to create the classrooms and offices and pods where all the instructors can meet instead of isolating in their lab, so they don't get to interact with the rest of the staff and faculty of the campus. And by also pulling the classrooms out of the lab, that allows the college to multi-use the classrooms when they're not used for professional tech to teach English, math, and stuff. So there's classrooms are still in there, but we don't have them in what we're going to go over tonight. First of all, this is welding. And as you can see, welding is mainly a lot of instruction. They do a lot of instruction on small metals, teaching welds. And so the welding lab has created a bunch of use of booths. We like to set the booths up so the booths can be used for all instruction, TIG, MIG, ARC. We've got an area that I'll go over that's more in the prep area where they can teach the oxyacetylene, because that creates more hazards and stuff, so we try to isolate that out of the general stick and gas areas. Then as you can see on the upper half of the sheet, they've asked for some exterior storage and prep area that they can also do some instruction outside. And then we've kind of isolated the booths into first year and second year but it has the flexibility that you could expand and grow the first-year program, and anybody can walk into any booth at any time and teach on any process. And it has the flexibility for more after-hours instruction to the community. As part of the welding lab, it works really well, and they like the idea of separating out the grinding area. The grinding area in the welding instruction creates a bunch of hazards of debris and stuff, so we like to create that from where the welding's going on so we don't have debris and stuff. And it also is very noisy. And as I get further down the road with this concept that we've worked out with instructors, is the welding module would go off to the left there of the metal prep lab, and the grinding maintenance millwright would be to the lower part of the sheet, and then the right would be machining. And so we've created, with their help, an area that they can all come to use and use fabrication, metal prep, and grinding area as a shared use between the spaces, so we're not replicating and duplicating spaces that they're both going to primarily use. So in this prep area, that's the shared use, we have a metal prep area, which both areas have a bridge crane. The metal prep area is more for cutting with the plasma and the hot torches. So that area is taken care of for ventilation and stuff for that kind of use. And then the fabrication area is basically where their machines are, their shears, their presses are, that they could actually fabricate a trailer or work on other equipment. It's a good use space for maintenance millwright to come in there and do some of the instruction that they can in their other lab because they don't have the space. And it also allows group projects between machining and welding that the students can interact. If the machine labs build some axles and the welding lab comes in and builds the frame for the trailer, so they learn to work their trades together. So it's just one of the concepts. And again, it takes away the duplication of space of the labs to bring it together, and they can all share. Also creates the possibility to actually start a fabrication program at the college if so need be. So moving on into machining.
Before we move away from welding, how many students are currently being taught at one time in the classroom, and what's the proposal on this?
Welding, typically they like to have 18 to 20 students. So the labs are set up to have the 18 to 20 students. Set up now that you could run 2-hour blocks of the welding labs. So with the configuration that we have here, you could probably run 120 students through a semester.
You have the capability for that,
Yes.
not that you want to go there.
And through your questionnaires, what was the demand?
The demand is, and Lori would have to get in that a little bit with the waiting list, but I think they,
I think one of the things that the college has been working on is updating and creating a new educational master plan. And I think that demographics have been looked at and everything, and I think that they're aspiring to run about 80 students through
Semester or annually?
annually, I believe.
Now, you said 120, was that annually?
It has the capability of
Right.
that.
But it sounds like that's not a comfortable number. That'd be,
Well, as a college, you might have the space for something, but you've also got to get the support to run that space. So whether the budget allows for additional instructors, I mean, you can only stretch, the more students that you serve at one time, your
well,
quality.
then that's okay. That's where I'm driving, because, is it lack of instructors? Is it nobody wants to take a class from 6 to 8 o'clock on a Saturday night? So there might be hours available, but not be a conducive time where someone wants to take the class.
Kind of. But one of the things you want to look at too, as we move towards the future, and especially with something as great as welding, is it is advancing very rapidly. Automation is entering, but welding is also seen as it changes, your local business and industry might have employees and things like that that they want to retrain or skill upgrade. And so creating a lab that has the ability to serve 120 students, but you're only running 80 students through, might make time for you to better serve your community and your business and industries doing different types of programming, if that makes sense.
and not to confuse you that, because when I'm talking again, that they like 18 to 20 students, and that's first and second year, so that would be 40 students. When I say 120 throughout the day, because we're talking about the classrooms and them not being used, this has the capability that you can run 40 students or 120 with that 2-hour block. So it's going to give you the flexibility to run that many students through there. But you do need the capability to have 18 to 20 students in first year and second year currently. It would just be broke up in modules, so you would have 4 first-year classes, 4 second-year classes throughout the day. And then the instructors, you probably have a couple extra instructors just to help it, but, you know, they would, say one instructor taught 2 classes, and then you had some help, and then another instructor would teach the other classes. So, again, this is like flexibility for 20 years down the road. But it's, I hope that that answers the question. With all of these labs, typically, I think the high point they like to stay at is 18 as we'll get through these, because
Is that for the quality of education or safety?
quality of education, size of the labs, demographics like Lori hit on. When you start going over that many students, you see how people start tripping on themselves. But you still, like I said, have the flexibility. In the machining lab, you could do 2-hour blocks of 18 students. That's a demand thing. But it doesn't make sense from a standpoint to take the classes down if you only have a demand for 20 students and only have 5 students in a class for 2-hour blocks. It's better to have if that makes sense. So in the machining lab, the move is to go to CNC machines, which is computerized machines, but manual instruction is still very important. The transition fully hasn't went over to the CNC machine, so a lot of students coming out of school may get a job where they have to use manual machines. And a lot of the instructors like to still teach the manual process because it's the mindset before you go to the computer that you actually know how to do it by hand. And so that equipment is still very important. So the way they wanted their lab broke up is, again, the prep area that would come in from the fabrication area, the manual machines, and then on the right side of the sheet, we're broken up into an area for the CNC mills and lathes. The lab would be flexible as down the road with the future, the manual machines are going to continue to go away, and you could grow the CNC equipment into the lab space, and it would be set up for that. So you could slowly adapt out some of the manual equipment. Then onto the maintenance millwright. A lot of you aren't familiar with that program. These people generally kind of do the overall concept of everything on the process. So in their lab, you'll see that they also instruct on welding and a lot of metal work. They also get into hydraulics and electrical work. And so their lab is a mixture of this use. And so you can see how that's split up. Again, they would share the fabrication area with the welding shop and the grinding room. Then as we get into some of the other trades, we have the HVACR. And instruction there is basically on residential. But they do like to instruct a little bit on commercial units. So the lab is basically set up with a bunch of trainers, heat pumps, rooftop units. And so the concept here is to give them the ability to do that with the condensate all outside, and then we would create the lab with some of the rooftop units so it'd be like a working lab, because they can come up and change the filters and test the things. They too also do a little bit of instruction, so you'll see there's electrical training room. They teach on boiler and hydronics, a little bit of brazing and welding, a little bit of sheet metal fabrication, and then the commercial refrigeration side. Then the automotive lab. Concept here is to split up first and second year. one of the things that we're working with as the module is to be able to have the flexibility, because unlike welding, machining, some of the other labs, it's easy that they don't have a piece of equipment that can't be moved out at night. So a student welding on a piece of metal can store that in their locker, and they can't, and somebody can come in at night and take a class. When we get into the automotive and diesel and the collision, that's hard to do. If you've got a car on the lift, you can't take it and move it. So we're working on modules to try to create that, so there's more flexibility for nighttime classes.
Robert, would you be so kind as you go through these, give us our current square footage, what we have in each one of these different sectors, and how many students are currently enrolled and are graduating, and what this additional square footage, if it's there, what that will give us as far as head count, graduation in those fields?
I didn't actually put all that data on this because we just tonight wanted to go over the programming of the labs and that kind of stuff, but I do have that and I can get it for you. But right now I can't.
Well, I think it's pretty important for us to understand is that the square footage we have and the number of graduates, we know that there's currently waiting lists in these fields. Did we build enough square footage? It's great to have these pictures here, but we'd like to know what the total square footage is and what we're going to increase based on industry demand.
I can give you kind of a generic answer to that.
That's good enough for right now.
It's pretty much everything. I believe the college is looking at almost doubling the capacity on, except for a few programs that it feels like it's sufficient in, such as like the AutoCAD. The CAD, I think, is the only one that didn't double. Is that, I'm pretty sure that's it. But pretty much doubling capacity on almost everything. Welding saw the biggest increase and the biggest demand for that, so that welding lab has been given a large focus on it. Automotive is another industry that there is a large demand and a large waiting list for, and trying to double that capacity too.
Mr. Chair? So that'll come in a later presentation. I'm just trying to understand. Tonight, you're just showing us what the feedback you were given on what the
Yes.
instructors see?
But-
Because there is a whole lot more we asked for, and that'll come later.
Yes.
We have most of that tonight. We were just going over the programming efforts. If you have any questions, we can address it, and I can step back and I can give you a general synopsis of how much the labs have grown. The welding lab is about a third bigger, and then by adding the fabrication and the grinding in rooms, would be a total new addition that you don't have. The machining area is basically double what you have, and the maintenance millwright is almost 1.5, I mean, it's almost 3 times what you have. He's very lacking on his space. When we look at the automotive lab, their theory is to get a whole new bay of 10 cars. Primarily, you only have what you see on one side of there, and the tool rooms and stuff aren't broken out that way. So it's not so much about the square footage that you have, it's a lot of it over the years, and things have changed. It isn't laid out primarily for the instruction that goes on anymore. So it's a little bit more than the square footage. Again, this is ideal. This would be 20 years down the road. And so what we did with the instructors was we wanted to see that. If I added up the square footage that I'm going to give you tonight, that's probably a couple 100,000 square feet, and we want to be around 80 to 90,000 square feet. So we've been going back with them. But when we look at how this will come together or could in a building, we don't want to take the ability of this being able to be added on there, because that's kind of what the problem that you have now. There's no way to grow where you're at. So when we come in the end scheme, we might only have one bay with 10 cars, but we want you to be able to add in 10 years that other bay and not be going, where would we put it? So a lot of this that we're looking at now tonight is where the instructors saw the college in 20 years. Okay.
And back to what the instructor says, who set the demand of these future jobs? If you're doubling the square footage, is industry verifying that their need is going to double in the next 10 years?
Lori's been looking at that and the demographics and the projected growth ratios for the community here in the Northwest. Also a little bit about pulling out of the Spokane Valley, because you're going to pull students out of there. If you have a nice new facility, you are going to pull students out of those demographics over here.
Will we have access to the questionnaires and the feedback and the demand?
Yes, that'll all be an appendix that we'll get to you, and we'll have manuals on all the equipment stuff. A lot of we can duplicate that for everybody or leave it as reference, but I mean, it's a lot of information. We'll have a summary and then an appendix with all that information that we've gathered.
Go ahead, could you continue, please?
So with automotive, be ideal for them to have a first year, second year area, unit repair, combined locker rooms, tool room. With the diesel, and again, these are modules are set up just to get an idea of how the labs would work as these come together into one building, or however they transition. They are ideally not going to look like this anyway, because as you start to put these in the building, the doors aren't going to be ideal, but this is just the ideal that your instructors came up that they'd like to see. So with the diesel lab, they were also looking at they would like to have 210 bays. Not only do they want the ability to work on the semi-trailers, but they also want to be able to pull graders and cats and work on other equipment in there. Again, this is a little over double what you have now for your diesel. Collision repair. This is primarily 3 times what he has right now. He's really in a very small area. He makes it work very well, and he doesn't complain, but he does need some more area. And part of the problem with all of the programs is the vehicle storage and stuff that they work on with the cars. So with the vehicle prep, they like the ability to work on the cars, be able to pull the cars over and have a prep area, wash, and then, as you know, they take the cars to the paint booth and then they're done. They also need some instruction on welding, and so they have a metal fabrication area. So not only can they give instruction on the vehicles, on the dent repair, the frame repair, they can also teach that in the metal fabrication lab. They also need part storage because they're ordering parts in to work on the cars, and keep track of that. A lot of the instruction, like with automotive, they're teaching the students how to work with the community, so the community is coming in to have their cars repaired or worked on. CAD lab, basically our computer rooms where they do CAD instruction. They have a main printing room, interactive group for modeling. They're very progressive, this department. They're working on a lot of 3D modeling, which is kind of the future instead of printing. So instead of actually having a 3-dimensional item on a 2-dimensional piece of paper, they're buying the equipment to actually make the 3D modeling. So as they draw this in CAD, these printers will actually cut them out or produce them out of molded plastic or starch. So they're very intricate. Then the ORPV does a lot of instruction on a lot of different things, from ATVs, lawnmowers, jet skis. So their lab is a lot of specialized a little bit in the equipment. It's all small engines, but there's a lot of variety in those small engines. Basically in not the engines, but in the transmissions and clutches and stuff on all these equipment. So ideally, he would also like to have a first and second year. Right now, he has a first year. His space is about half of what you see up there. He's always lacking for storage. He has some very nice equipment that's getting ruined because he doesn't have adequate storage. So we've created an indoor storage space for his instruction vehicles, and then some more outdoor space for some lesser equipment. Again, he does a lot of different instruction on different things. So each one of the bays is set up to lift ATVs, motorcycles. They can bring snowmobiles, jet skis, anything in there. And then they've got some specialty labs, a dyno It's basically a motorcycle dyno that they do all the testing to get the performance and make sure that the work they've done in the lab is proved on that system. They also do a little bit of machining and stuff on the equipment and repair. And so they also have a tear down area similar to automotive to teach on the small engine instruction.
Mr. Chair? Even though we've been given the information before, I don't have it with me right now. I'm wondering if at least as we go through these, maybe you could remind us what's currently on campus, whether here or out in Post Falls, or if we're leasing it here in the community. I don't know, do you have that information?
Yep, I do. Currently, you're leasing not too far from here ORPV, which is in a lab that's set up the best that it can for what it is. That's one of your leases. You also have a lease for the welding, which is quite a ways away. One of the complaints that mainly the staff has, that they're really disassociated with campus because they're clear out there, so they're not on campus. The students really complain that they have to drive clear in here to take their other classes. So they're really disassociated. ORPV a little bit, but welding quite a bit. Then currently, I believe the rest of the programs are all on campus. Carpentry, which we haven't got to, we're getting to. Your automotive, HVAC, collision, diesel, CAD tech. I believe all the rest of them are here on campus.
So the welding, that's up on Ramsey? By the landfill?
Yeah, it's out at Post Falls. The ORPV's on Ramsey.
Sorry, ORPB, okay.
The carpentry lab is basically about double what he has. Very easy gentleman to work. He basically just needs a shell space with a lot of power outlets and stuff. He's got some table saws. We went through, he's retiring in a couple years, so we anticipated that the next instructor might want to move into casework and some other cabinetry stuff, so we've put in the flexibility to add some planers and stuff, but basically this is just a generic shell space. The only specialization would be the dust collectors. Basically, he does a lot of instruction on the field and builds a house every year.
That concludes your report?
We can talk about anything else. There's a lot to talk about. If you want to talk about the demographics, projections, any of that stuff, we're just putting that into the final paperwork, but we have a lot of it in here. If you have any questions that.
Are there any questions from the board?
Well, I would just really like to get a clear understanding is that the industry, the community here has led many efforts to try to educate the institution about what the future demand and needs are, and sometimes have not been listened to very well. So we need to make sure that we match industry today, and we got to be really careful when we say, well, that tomorrow's technology, we don't even know what we're teaching, so that what we'll do is that we'll try to guess what that is. Technology in welding hasn't changed over the last 25 years. There's basic foundation that has stayed exactly the same. The same thing as machining, where you say we're going to move out these manual machines. There's a lot of need to be able to understand how to do it manually before you go through the CNC part of that. So I'd be very caution you not to try to move this into later technology and don't walk away from where that is. So, but speaking from industry's perspective, is we would like to go to the table and have a voice and tell you what we need. We could have told you 20 years ago or 5 years ago what our demand was, and we did that. So we need to make sure that industry is fully engaged and involved and has their thumbprint on this, because they are the future employers of all these students. So we need to make sure that they are there. And so I'd love to go through that report on each one of these skill sets and who are the people that gave you the information and where it was gathered as far as where we're going to go with this.
Well, part of the response to that is, you're right, we don't know where the future is, we've only know where we've been, and so we can only anticipate and learn from the past. And so when we do these labs, and these labs that we've looked at tonight are flexible, if CNC machines went away in the future and we went all to manual machines, I would be able to clear out the CNC area and put more manual machines in. So what I'm saying is we're creating spaces through this program that are flexible so you can bring those in and out. With the collision repair, it's not about fixing dents in cars anymore, it's about just replacing parts. So the instruction's changing a little bit, and so we create flexibility in these labs so that we can change that. In the automotive industry, you're getting more battery operated cars in green and biofuel, so those are going to change the automotive and diesel. So we want to create the flexibility in these labs that can adapt. On the industry side, like I was speaking a little bit earlier, we're working in these with the programming and the instructors, the flexibility that you could maybe, but that would be on the curriculum side, to be able to teach block modules, so somebody could come in for 3 or 4 weeks during the semester and get some instruction on some specific things without having to take a full semester of classes. So we're trying to create the lab spaces that are flexible to do all of that. Spaces that if industry wanted to come in at certain time, they could use the lab and do some specialty training to keep their employees up on stuff so they don't have to duplicate that at their own facility, because it's cheaper for them to give a little bit to the college and the college have that equipment and also instruct on it. So we build all of that in there, and that would be the decision for you guys to where you want to take that.
Mr. Chair, I think it'd be helpful for our new board members to get a history on our contract with RGU, what we asked for them to do, and why it's kind of being presented in pieces, because it's probably not making a lot of sense just coming here with this. So maybe, Joe, you could give a history about what we've asked RGU to do for us.
Yeah, yes, we've contracted with RGU some time ago, and in part it was to look at the trends and the demand and look at what the needs are for a new career and technical center. Now, they have already come in once and given us an update on a portion of that. Today, it was to come in and present the programming from the instructor's perspective in terms of what the needs would be. And then the final report will contain the data, much of the data that has been asked for tonight. And so the intent tonight was not to bring in that data, but just look at visually what these labs could look like. And so it is a very, very comprehensive report. And Ron, do you know approximately when this will be completed and then be able to be presented?
January, it's supposed to come to the board sometime in January. You would have it.
And there was another component to that, if I may, that we were asking for to address our short-term needs and our long-term needs. And we defined short-term and long-term as short-term 2 to 5 years and long-term 5 years to 20 years. So, because we have need for both, frankly. And so that's what we contracted them to do. And so I look forward to that comprehensive
And
report.
also, I believe you're looking at potential sites for this facility along with costs associated with the construction on different sites.
Correct, and it's hard to come to a board meeting because I know when you get this final report, it's probably going to be sitting down and hashing out stuff for a lot of hours, so there's understanding and decision making. And if we got into that debate tonight, we would never get to go home. So, but we look forward to you when you get the final report that we get to sit down and go over and look at all these things, because there's going to be lots of questions and stuff. But I know it would just become a big debate if we tried to do it in this.
Well, Robert, in ending with that is I want to go home too, but I want to make sure that this time that we do it right. The college came to the private sector in an organization called Partners in Education 6 years ago. The industry leaders made their prediction based by the skill sets and what they were the future demand was. 5 years after the fact, we took that information that we compiled and saying where this industry is growing, what the demand is, and we would have told you needed to double this square footage, you needed to shrink this size, because the people that were going to hire these kids in the regional area from Seattle to Montana and down into southern Idaho came to the table and said, this is what we see this industry trends. We missed it. So I don't want to miss that again. I want to get all the intelligence we can to make sure that everybody, the major employers here, the future employers here, and what we see happen in this country, we don't go and start a landscaping technology course because it sounds like a good idea, that we have the information in front of us before we make a decision like this.
That will be all in there, and that's Lori's specialties. My specialties is working with instructors and laying out the labs and very much looking at the future of all these programs. Lori's putting together all the demographics and the demands based on all of that stuff. If you want her to talk a little bit about it, we can.
No, I think that if we see there, we'll be able to see where there's a hole maybe in some of our major employers that should have a weigh-in on this, where they see their trends going, like Kimball, Buck Knives, Sunshine Minting. Major employers in this community should be at the table.
And part of the other element that we're looking at is there's a big wish list, but there's going to be a cost associated with creating a facility for this wish list, and so we're looking at that too. Because it'd be nice just to snap our fingers and that would all be there and we could start using it and providing for industry, but that's something that you guys are gonna have to look at. But we're just putting together all the best options, a summary based on all the knowledge and all the stuff that we've gathered on all this information for you guys to make an educated decision on where you wanna take NIC with this.
Our goal, Robert, is to make sure that every kid that takes a professional technical education course has a job when they get done. That should be our goal when we do this, not create something that we think is a future. We need to have a responsibility.
And a lot of our basis that we've looked at is the kids coming through these programs, and in the program that you got a kid that's not college ready, but he's career ready, meaning that when he gets done with instruction, that you could have, that they can get a job and they can be beneficial to the employer, that they get a job, so there's not some retraining once they get that job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Robert, thank you very much.
Yep.
Our next report is the Area Agency on the Aging. Pearl?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, trustees. Appreciate the opportunity to give you an update. And this report won't have a lot of details about the daily operations of the organization, and there are some new trustees who may like to have that information. I invite you to give me a call if you'd like to have an appointment to do that. So my main purpose here today is an update and inform you about the activities that we'll be engaging in this coming year. We are a department of North Idaho College and fit under the portion of the mission that talks about community service. And much like Head Start, except at the other end of the spectrum, helping senior citizens, not seniors in college or seniors in high school, but senior citizens, to find solutions for independent living. So being probably 98% of our budget from state and federal taxes, sustainability is a subject that we're really looking at closely. And as most people in that position are finding out, is that they really need to diversify their funding. And we've looked at some different approaches over the last several years. In 2006, our short-term approach was to initiate a semi-annual mail campaign. At the beginning of the campaign in 2006, we raised about $1,200. It peaked at $2,700, and in 2011, when the economy wasn't really running that well, we were down to about $1,900. So obviously, that approach is not going to give us what we need to really diversify our funding, although we'll continue to use that approach. Some of you will recall that in January of 2011, I came to the trustees, and at that time, received your approval to open an endowment with Inland Northwest Community Foundation. And at this time, the balance of the endowment is at $18,900. It takes about 5 to 7 years to get a principal that you can use the interest for your daily operations, and so we have a ways to go before that endowment is really filling in the gap. And so our mid-range goal now is to look at fee-for-services. And these are services that we currently provide under tax support. They're free for the people that use them, but we very much focus those free services on people who don't have an ability to pay. And we are finding that there is a significant demand for the services that we have that we're unable to meet. So a business plan has been prepared to move into this arena. And there's many components to the business plan. I wanted to highlight the needs and the opportunities that exist. Many people are aware of this age wave that's coming on to us. Right now, in the 5 northern counties, we have over 40,000 people that are 60 years of age and older. That's our target population. And we're serving about 10% of those people. If you just look at Medicare beneficiaries, 18,781, and that would include also persons with disabilities. And in this particular age group, 2/3 can expect to have chronic conditions that require health-related long-term support, the kinds of services that we are providing out of our office. So we feel there's a pretty significant opportunity and need there. Really, the most significant thing that's happened recently is, in this regard, is the Affordable Care Act, which is creating additional opportunity for us to be more engaged. Another aspect of the business plan that we've been looking at is just building our capacity to really move into this arena. Evidence-based interventions are new tools that we're putting or getting our staff engaged in. And that's because when you're working more closely with the healthcare professions, you really have to be able to show to them that you have outcomes that are going to make a difference in the beneficiaries that they serve. We'll be able to measure them with these evidence-based interventions. We'll have points of validity that assure that we are delivering the interventions as tested. We do have support from Health and Human Services, where our federal funds are coming from. They're at the table with Medicare and Medicaid and talking about area agencies on aging around the country and how they can be very supportive in this arena. And our National Association of Area Agencies as well is providing technical support. Some of the payer sources that we've looked at are listed here, and on the left side are the 4 different services that really, again, are consistent with what we're already doing. Managed care will probably be the most significant payer source that we'll work with. I want to highlight Employee Assistance Program because that's where North Idaho College and many of the large employers have EAP programs that we could be interacting with. As you see the aging of the population, you're seeing a lot of older people in the workforce, and they are helping to care for their parents, and it can interfere with their work. Through some of the services that we provide, it could be very beneficial and keep them employed if they choose to be. Writing a business plan is something I have never done. I've been working in social services for 30 years, and it was like pulling teeth, I have to say. But it really helped me to see that it's health-related long-term services that we're providing, and we could better interact with the health care community as we move forward. It's become a great communication tool with our advisory board and other arenas, especially with our management and staff. And it will guide us day to day with the ways that we have to update our operations to be in this arena. And the best news for me was when I had it reviewed by somebody and they said, your business plan is never done. And I thought, that's great. I can make the changes that you recommended, put version 1.1 on it, and print the thing and get it out to people. So what I realize is that what we have put together in this business plan for fee-for-service, a year from now, it may look very different, and that's okay. So that's where we're heading, and I would entertain any questions or comments.
Brooke, can you talk about the a number of clients that you serve throughout the northern counties?
We're currently serving about 4,600 clients. So just a little bit over 10% of the population that's 60 and older.
And Pearl, are most of those referrals from families or self-referrals?
Most is from families or healthcare professionals. So we're already pretty well connected with healthcare professionals. And just recently set up memorandums of understanding with all 5 of the hospitals in the 5 counties.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Pearl, do you do private fundraising where that you would come in and do an auction, raise money for this? I mean, it sounds like when you say we raised, you know, $1,200, it doesn't seem like a whole lot of money, and more people get there and get a chance to see. For somebody that's in that aging, they're over 60, I'd be willing to give you some money now so you take care of me when I get older. So, so I look at this and say that some of the nonprofit organizations that are very vocal, very visual, like the food banks, tremendous community participation, and there's people that have money that would love to share in your vision, but you just got to get in front of them. So do you do that today?
We don't do it mainly because of the lack of staff to do it, but we have been working with our advisory board to move them more into that arena. And I appreciate those comments because I think they're right on.
Well, tell you what, as a person that loves to get involved with raising money and twisting people's arm, I would be more than happy to help you do the first one.
I will be in contact with you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
I have a question, but I think Ron just volunteered. As I look at your brochure here, and I see where it says affiliated with North Idaho College, and if I was to ask you as just a citizen off the street, what does that mean?
What it means is that the state of Idaho was decided to set up 6 regions in the state of area agencies on aging. This is a federal initiative to have area agencies. They're all across the country. Idaho decided to set it up in 6 regions. And then what they said is, we want to find some community organization that already exists that will provide that kind of infrastructure without us setting up freestanding nonprofits to deliver the services. Mainly because we're small. Our staff totals 21, including part-time people. And so really to run a nonprofit with 21 staff in the kind of resources that you would need would be quite wasteful. And so they found organizations like North Idaho College who could give us that infrastructure of an HR office, a business office, in order to eliminate that kind of structure, the need of that structure.
Okay, I'm going to have a question we'll go back to this one. Now, you mentioned about 90% of your funding comes from state and federal taxes. The other 10 is that the fundraising and the rest of that?
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask a generic question here then? Are we getting some override dollars for the time and effort, same as we are like with Head Start? Is that similar with the oversight for this program? Is that a similar structure?
You're talking about indirect costs. Ron, you want to answer that?
We set that up, we're really hard on that with Head Start. We started to work with the area aging office on that, but their funds have been reduced enough in the past couple of years. We do not receive money from them, but they do not take a lot of our time.
Okay, because I
we
want
are
to
not-
extend that, because in the conversations we've had and some of the things I've been thinking about, what I'm wondering is the cost-benefit analysis, even of like our oversight of Head Start. I'd like to know what the indirect funds are that we get, but I'd like to have the individuals that are putting in time identified, it should be able to be easy to calculate based on their wages and benefits, approximately what an hour of their time costs, and then what sort of time that they're having to devote to these oversight efforts, and how much of our staff. And are we bringing in a couple extra dollars? Are we breaking even? Are we losing some and we're writing it off as, community service? So I'm kind of curious, because those seem a bit ancillary to our primary mission here as a college. So I'm trying to understand why we've been recruited to oversee these other external organizations. And then what does that mean?
And our other community college in the state also sponsors an area agency on aging.
Which one of the other two?
CSI.
CSI.
CSI does. And part of the answer to your question is that we are not on the campus. We are totally independent in terms of physical space,
Which makes you even more ancillary.
telephones, that kind of thing. And we do have requirements to match federal money, and some of what NIC provides is match for that money.
Any other questions? Thank you
Thank you,
very
Mr.
much, Pearl.
Chairman.
Thank you, Pearl.
We now have the constituent reports, and Julie Salinas is first.
Good evening, Chairman, Trustees, Dr. Dunlap, and guests. Thank you for allowing time for ASNIC to give a report. Also, thank you for taking time to meet with ASNIC today and allow us to show you our office and show you our goals. Since our last meeting, we have been extremely busy. First, we held St. ASNIC, and it was a huge success. 120 children from our NSC community were served. As usual, we were pleased to host such a wonderful event and to have the support of the campus community in making it happen. Specifically, I would like to thank Staff Assembly and all of the individuals who bought gifts. Senator Jansen Hunsaker has been working closely with dining services to improve market accessibility for students who have disabilities. The lighting in the market area will be improved to assist visually impaired students, and a gate will replace the current turnstile as the entrance for those in wheelchairs and crutches. 2 of our senators received grants during the foundation grant process. Senator Gustav Luster had his proposal funded in full of chess tables to be put on campus, and Senator Duncan Menzies had his project partially funded for the Student Art Commission piece. Duncan will be accepting art proposals into January. A committee will then decide what piece will go into the Student Union building. These projects will help improve student life and diversity. Next month, I will be traveling to Boise for Education Week and meeting up with legislators as well as the student body presidents from CWI and CSI to discuss topics that pertain to all community colleges in Idaho. I am looking forward to helping promote NIC's legislative agenda and representing the students of North Idaho College to the legislators. We have been learning more about the work done in years past with the Rec Center and have requested to be put on the agenda in February or March. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Julie? Julie, thank you.
Do you have the date for the student gathering in Boise? Is it that Monday? It almost.
Yes, it's January.
And we're doing Boise on Wednesday?
Tuesday and
Yeah, it's
Wednesday.
Martin Luther King usually.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gary Stark, Staff Assembly.
Good evening, Chairman, Trustees, Dr. Dunlap, and Mark Lyons. I thought you were going to steal my thunder, Julie, but you did not, so thank you very much. One thing I did want to bring up also with St. Asnick was Staff Assembly did raise a bunch of a food drive, cash drive. They were a little short on funds, and they put out like an extra email, and I think the number went up above $1,200, I do believe. And they ended up putting together 51 food baskets, so that was great teamwork there. Our staff assembly meeting, one item that we had was the staff sabbatical, and it's a new process. We have a lot of people that are that were interested, but they didn't really qualify because in there it says you have to be here 7 years. So the deadline came December 14th, and we had one application, and the application was mine. I turned it in for myself, just to make sure that we had one going. And thank you, Ron, for signing that. And anyways, we'll see how that goes. Like I say, there's a lot of questions. It says you have to be here 7 years. Just coming in here tonight, I was talking to John Totten, and he's been here over 7 years, but there was a break in the middle. So we're saying, you know, does he still qualify? So there's little things like that we have to work out. Also, I have to apologize or say sorry to someone that I missed out on a shout out at the last meeting, and her name happens to be Dawn Sorry. So I apologize, but she had a shout out for extra effort during increased workload, and that came from Linda Michaels. So that is my report. Anybody have any questions?
Mr. Chair? So we haven't looked at those procedures for a long time, Gary, and I suppose that's something that you're going to bring forward and visit with the president about. But we hate to have those opportunities go by and nobody be able to take up on the opportunity for a procedure that maybe doesn't make sense. So
Yeah, we're actually thinking, we'll have to talk about, but hopefully maybe extending the deadline so that maybe have another information session, because I think the information session that we had, there was about 8 to 10 people that came, but like I said, a lot of them didn't qualify, but a lot of questions came up from those people coming in and asking about it, so we do.
well, we feel like we get just as much out of the sabbatical from all the education you bring back to us as you get. So I really hope we do get to work that out.
Yeah, definitely. It's a plus for the college, you bet, and the employees, so, thanks.
Any other questions? Gary, thank you very much. Kathy O'Brien is not here this evening. She had a family emergency, I think. So was anybody going to fill in for her, or we pass her report?
No, there's nobody here for it.
Just pass her report. So John Totten.
Mr. Chair, if it suits the board, I'll just wait until I come on with new business.
That's fine. Sure. The next item on the agenda then is a second reading for the audit.
President's report.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ran right over you, didn't I?
That's okay.
You have a report?
I'd be happy to yield all my time.
It looked like a short report, so.
Shorter.
I think he said Joe who?
President's report, Joe Dunlap.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and trustees and colleagues. Tonight's report will be a little bit different. I want to reflect a little bit about where we've been and where we're going and some of the accomplishments. And as we gather here tonight, we have two new, and I'm speaking over the course of the past 6 months, since about July 1st. As we gather here tonight, we have two new trustees. You've had one new president. You've had two new vice presidents. You've had one new dean. You've had two new directors. And today we hired a new director for our aerospace and outreach programs. And so the point is that there has been a considerable leadership change at all levels of this institution. And so while there may be frustrations about what has happened in the past, I would encourage everyone to take a look at the activity that is taking place, the plans that are put in place, because I believe there's a considerable amount of optimism in terms of where we are going. And so I'd like to reflect on some of those things that have happened over the past 6 months and talk about a few of those initiatives in terms of where we're going. Tonight, Lita had to leave because we have the nurse pinning, which is the fall graduation ceremony where the nurses receive their pin. This year, our nurses with their national certification exam had a 100% pass rate. Our university partners experienced about an 86% pass rate. And so some of our programs like that are real bright spots at this college. We also had an economic impact study that was done, and Mark oversaw that. And the economic impact for this community is $164.6 million. And that's pretty significant in terms of NIC's contribution to this community. We've been able to maintain our enrollment, and in fact, this quarter increased enrollment by 1%, which does not sound like much, but much of the country is experiencing a decline in enrollment. Washington State has experienced a 6% decline because of what is happening with the economy. But we've been able to look at different strategies to try and ensure that our enrollment is sustainable. And we've got even more plans going forward, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We opened a new outreach center in Sandpoint, which significantly increased our capacity and allowed us to bring more programming to that particular outreach center. And now students in the Sandpoint area can complete an AA degree without ever having to leave Sandpoint. And eventually, with our university partners, students will be able to complete a bachelor's degree in Sandpoint without ever leaving that community. We've seen an unprecedented amount of collaboration between the 3 community colleges in this state that didn't exist heretofore. And we've collaborated on such things as a dual credit delivery agreement. We are in the final phases of putting that together, and it will standardize how dual credit is delivered by the community colleges throughout the state of Idaho. We have collaborated on the out-of-county tuition and are looking at steps to move forward at maybe a different funding formula, maybe a legislative initiative, but to look at how we can influence changes in that regard. The 3 community colleges collect, gather data differently and explain their stories differently. And so we have agreed to adopt the voluntary framework of accountability that will standardize how we collect our data, how we measure our benchmarks, and how we represent what we do so that we can speak with one voice to the legislature and to our communities. We have also embraced the Community College Initiative, which is a state initiative that has a goal that by the year 2020, 60% of Idahoans between the ages of 24 and 35 will have a degree or certificate. That's a very, very ambitious goal to achieve in 8 years because right now that demographic only is at 31%. We will help make a dent in that with our community college partners. Will we achieve that? Probably not, but we will make some very good progress towards that. Through the efforts of Marie Price and Mike Myers and Sarah Flayland, this college was able to secure a $2.9 million Department of Labor grant that supports the emerging aerospace industry and improves advanced manufacturing for the northern Idaho counties. Through the Avista Corporation, we've attracted an entrepreneurship program where Avista has put $1 million on the table, $100,000 to adopt the curriculum, and $500,000 in microloan funds for promising entrepreneurs. We've had enormous faculty and success stories, and I can't even begin to mention all of them, but Al mentioned athletics this evening. Our Honor Society PTK is at the 5-star level, which is the highest level. There are very few in this country that have achieved that level, and it's a mark of excellence. Our graphic design programs have won many awards, including the coveted Addy, which is the advertising award, and it's like winning a Grammy for advertising. I mentioned our nursing pass rate. You've been to our Christmas concerts, and our foundation has awarded enormous amounts of money in mini grants to a considerable number of faculty and staff who have applied for projects that improve the quality of education and life here on this campus. And Mark Browning, I'm going to turn to you. Today, we released online the annual report. It went to the printers today, and we'll have that shortly. But Mark, would you like to mention a little bit about that?
You bet. Thank you. Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the annual report is the official document where we report all of the events and the milestones that the college has achieved over the last year. That is now available on the website. I believe we've got a link that we can send to you directly so that you can look that up. We'll have a printed copy that will be available for you. We anticipate, there's a chance we might get it in between the holiday. More than likely, it'll be available right after the first of the year. But that is a document that we will use extensively in the coming months to report our activities to the community and to various governmental leaders around the area.
Thank you, Mark. In March, we will undergo an accreditation visit. It'll be our 7th year visit under a totally new system. And the purpose of accreditation is an intensive process of institutional self-evaluation and peer review. Accreditation offers a unique opportunity for all members of the institution, faculty, administrators, staff, students, alumni, and even board members to participate in a focused process that results in ongoing institutional improvement. And that accreditation visit will be March 25th through the 27th. And the accreditation report will be brought before the board at the January meeting for approval and then forwarding to the Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities. We have undertaken an ambitious project to develop an educational master plan that looks at the programming, looks at the facilities, looks at fund revenue and methods of increasing enrollment. And the intent was to bring that report to you at the January meeting, but considering we have the accreditation report and we still have a considerable amount of amount of work to do on this educational master plan, I will probably bring that before you at the February meeting if that is acceptable. A number of us with President's Cabinet met with a group from McCall, Idaho that Trustee Meyer asked us to take a look at. And there's a group in McCall, Idaho that wants to start a community college because they feel there is a hole in the education delivery system within central Idaho. And they have, in order to start a community college, they have to be affiliated with an accredited institution. And they've met with Boise State, CWI, CSI, and they have both, and all three of them have said thanks, but no thanks. We met with that group and have looked at what the requirements are based on the A6 operational agreement, based on accreditation. And we've offered some alternatives to them. We are still in the process of reviewing their proposal, and sometime over the next several weeks we will respond to them whether we think we can deliver education to that area or whether or not there's a partnership that we think would be mutually beneficial. On March 19th and 20th, the President's Sustainability Forum is being hosted here at NIC in addition to University of Idaho. And the focus on that will be sustainability for wastewater treatment and solid waste management. And it is primarily for communities and educators and students. The 19th being for students, the 20th being for communities and community board members, mayors, and that sort of thing. And it will be telecast amongst the institutions, and it will also be participated in by CWI. Just a couple dates so you know what's happening with us over the next few weeks. December 24th will be the last day before closure of the college for Christmas break. Staff will return on January 2nd. Faculty will return on January 8th, and the semester begins on January 14th. On Thursday, tomorrow at 3 o'clock, there is a reception in this room for Mick Armand and his service to the college as a trustee, and I would invite and encourage all of you to attend. And lastly, Mr. Chair, on behalf of the faculty, staff, and students at North Idaho College, we would like to wish the trustees a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and hope it's safe, and hope you return in January. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions?
Mr. Chair, President Dunlap, I'm wondering if maybe, probably everything that you just provided to us is in the annual report, and I'm a big fan of the annual report. It's always very well done. But if not, maybe we could get a copy of your comments tonight? Or are they all handwritten?
Neither.
Okay.
I
read
just
the annual
have
report.
a couple bullet points.
That's okay.
And,
It's in
but
the
if you, in my
What's the
weekly update to the trustees, maybe on Friday I can include some of that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Nielsen.
What you said, what I felt was very, very important, is when you talked about standardizing the grading system and the accounting system between the three colleges. I think that it's a shame that we can't do that, so that we measure the same graduation rate, the same success rate, the same placement rate, the same as we do there. So I think this is an excellent move for us to be able to do, because based on what we see so far is that NIC clearly is a shining star in the north, and probably we'll find out that they are a shining star across the state if we can standardize that reporting system. So.
And we will do that. And that's a product of the presidents and the chairs of the boards meeting and deciding on what initiatives are important. And we have retained Jerry G., who's a former VP of instruction at this college, to work through the implementation issues on how we will implement that voluntary framework of accountability. He's already come up with a timeline, and we expect to implement that in the fall of this next year.
Excellent.
Any other questions? Yes, Judy.
Is this a moment to segue into the fact that that kind of meeting of both presidents and boards, I think, has been very helpful, because College of Western Idaho is about 3 years old or so, and
Right.
and probably the impact we've worried about is geography. We're further from some of the action, and we need to be present. And the fact that when there's a third college in the same pot of money as we had before, we've worked hard at reminding, as College of Western Idaho said, we don't want to do you harm, but it doesn't hurt to be present. And I think one of the things we were looking forward to doing when we go to Boise for Education Week was a renewed connection for the board, because we don't have any occasion to cross paths very often. So I think over the last couple of years, we've done that. And I hope, Mr. Chair, in tonight's calendar, something you can give us an update on the dates of when you're thinking we need to be there to begin to make those plans, because in addition to having presidents meet at least once a year, the boards can talk, and one of the things we commiserate about is funding. And I think we've talked before about the need to begin to help our legislators think about the funding from students who do not live in our district and their tuition rate when they come attend NIC, which will be an interesting dilemma, because the other community college districts have different challenges than we do, but it's all the same, never enough money and more things to be done.
Mr. Chair. And to take off on that, I know that Mark, in the last meeting, I think you gave a report that once again CWI will be funded out of the governor's budget again this year. We don't, any idea on when the conversation will head toward all three colleges sharing hopefully a bigger pot? But I just can't imagine that this will go on forever, that the governor will fund CWI out of his budget. So any information on that?
Mr. Chairman, Trustee Wood, nothing public at this time.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No?
That'll leave everybody in suspense, right? Thank you very much, Joe.
Some Christmas present.
Now we have a second reading of the NIC audit, and Ron, are you going to stand up and
I'm going to try.
answer all the questions, right?
I'm suffering from a 2-hour tour I took today, especially. But board chair, board members, yeah, I am a little bit getting in and out of that one vehicle that Mr. Nielsen took me into today. But he did help me out of the vehicle. So anyway, you have seen the audit. There was a presentation made, and in tab 1 you have the highlights of the discussion. I really don't have any more to add to that, except that recommend that you accept the audit as presented to you at the last meeting, the 2011-2012 audit.
Any discussion?
I have some questions, and I think Ron might. Did you talk with Tony Hackworth by chance?
I did. Mr. Chair, I was going to make a recommendation. Upon your recommendation, I met and had a conversation with Tony Hackwith from Magnuson McHugh, who led this audit, and I had a series of questions, and she was not able to get back. She was in the middle of doing some audits, and so she just says, I cannot get this information to you till next week. So if there is no pressing to pass this under the second reading, I would like to ask and make a motion that this be continued until next month, where I can have my meeting with Tony Hackwith from Magnuson McHugh.
Okay, there's a motion to move this to the next meeting. Is there a second for that?
Meyer seconded it.
All right, is there any discussion on the motion to move it to the next meeting?
Only I want to know if I can still ask questions.
Pardon?
Can I still ask questions?
Well, right now, we're deciding the motion to move it to the next meeting.
My question is, if that motion passes, are we done with discussion, or can I still ask questions?
We're done with the discussion until the next meeting.
And I don't agree with the motion at this time.
Okay?
At least not for another 5 or 10 minutes.
Motion has been made and seconded, though. Let's vote on it. All in favor? This is the motion to move it to the next meeting.
Aye?
All in favor?
Nay.
Aye.
Now, if we're going to discuss it.
All opposed?
Nay.
No,
2 against?
Well,
I'd like to have the discussion.
I'd certainly open to discussion, so I think that I would request that maybe Mr. Nielsen could come back with his motion
In a few minutes.
after the discussion.
Like, second
Does
one
that
read
work?
You want to hold your motion until we have a discussion on the main item?
Mr. Chair, this is my first time I've ever had a motion undone by another motion by move by there, so I'll do whatever you tell me to do here.
That's the last
Well.
time you'll hear that, too.
And this is probably the easiest time, too, so we'll hold your motion off if you want to have some discussion on the second reading of the audit.
I would. I have a few questions, and I still, just because of my schedule, I've not really had the time with Sarah Garcia I would like also, but I want to throw a few things out at Ron, because there's some things that just jump out at me, and I guess these will be food for thought if we're not answering them right now. These are things about the audit that I do have some questions. When I look at the audit, one of the things that jumps out is I see financial information from both the NIC Booster Club and the NIC Foundation. And I guess I didn't know if I would see that in the NIC audit, because I think those are separate entities. So why is it in there? And then if that's the case, in the audit being public information, does that make the books and minutes of the Booster Club and the foundation, do those become open to public inspection?
In there because they're considered, under auditing standards, component units of the college, and that's why they are in the audit. The second part of the question, I can't answer for you. I would assume the answer would be yes.
Okay. The audit brings something else to mind. Magnuson McHugh's been in the news a bit lately because of some, their affiliation with the city and some of their misadventures recently, embezzlement being one of them. And I know it came up at the city council the other night about retaining them or going out for an RFP. Got me to thinking, so I'm looking at policy 7.01.04, which is business procedures. And as I look at this, I'm starting to wonder, what are we defining as professional services? And do we have somewhere where it lists what those are and the timing of these RFPs? Are they every 2 years? How are we, what's the procedure that implements this policy? And maybe I didn't find it. Do we have one that sets up the time frame for when we're reviewing who's doing our audits or who our legal counsel is or whatever the professional service might be?
There is one out there. I believe it's every 5 years. That audit is up. That audit will go out to an RFP this year. It's up, so it will go out. It will go out.
Is 5 years standard? Is it on a rotating basis where we're doing different professional services each year?
In my experience, it is. 40 years worth in this higher education, yes, it is.
Okay. So they were both put out to, so say the audit, that was put out to bid 5 years ago then?
Yes, before I got here. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm just reviewing a few notes. Because a number of these I'm going to say for Sarah. I don't necessarily need to throw them out here. No, I think those were a couple of the main things I wanted to touch on, was the professional services, want to understand about the relationship with the Booster Club and the foundation, and seeing that as part of the audit. And then I guess I still come back to, I'm looking at some of these other things that we're talking about, whether it be Head Start or the area for the aging, and trying to understand our relationship with them and how they're under our umbrella and where we include them and where we don't.
I think that's a discussion obviously the board could have. We at least heard from area agency on why they are included. And I think Head Start is pretty much the same venue. Head Start gives us I think it's about $16,000 a year in indirect cost, is what we get from them. I believe that's what the figure is right now. If I were to do that for area office and agent, I probably wouldn't look for any more than somewhere between $2,000 to $4,000, because I don't feel in what we do that we spend a lot of time with them. They're in with our regular systems to run a payroll, that kind of thing. We'll look at that information. I know
So
you.
do you think we were able to reasonably track the amount of time and energy that we're devoting to either of those, just as examples, and the manpower?
I think we could go back and talk about it and probably come up with something that for now would be fairly
Ballpark.
general. Yeah, I think we could do that. We have never discussed, because in reality, again, Todd, in our opinion, they don't really, we just run them through our systems for the most part. We don't provide them a whole lot of advice or anything like that. And again, and they don't receive any college funds, other than, as you're alluding to, some time and effort to run them through our system. So we'll talk about that, and we'll come up with something.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I could, I think before we do ask the staff to undertake something like that, really, this comes down to a value judgment by the Board of Trustees. And the board would determine, do we value this level of community service and the amount of effort that North Idaho College has to put toward this community service? And we are a community college, so for many, many years, we have supported Head Start and area agency. And so before we would, I understand the questioning, but I think that this should have some discussion with the board before we asked staff to undertake that kind of examination.
Oh, I just think we would want to know what the level of that community support is, and to try to quantify it in some capacity. I mean, it's okay to, not trying to disagree with you, but it's okay to say I want to support something, but I want to know if I'm supporting them at the $50 level or the $1,000 level. Am I a booster, or am I a platinum booster? That's all. I'm just trying to get.
And we will. And from, my opinion, from financial, it's minimal. The support is really minimal. Dollar-wise, it's minimal. It really is.
Yes.
On the same theme, I was thinking back over the years of we've asked this question before. We usually do most every year. Are we remaining whole in what we're asking taxpayers to spend through our budget to oversee other agencies? And that was part of the role of the community college, was to say there's some things we do, whether it's sharing the land for Art on the Green, and they help pay their way they can. And so your counsel to us over the years has been, if there's much time and effort consumed by our staff that could be used somewhere else, we need to figure out some price value for that. If there's not much consumed, then our philosophy as a board has been, that's one of those things we don't need to charge for. And as you identified, other areas where the budget is larger and takes more time from staff, we do in fact ask for some remuneration.
And I won't belabor the point, if I felt that it was taking any amount of my staff time, an ordinary amount, I'd be complaining to the president about either needing more help or getting additional dollars. I don't feel it's there, but again, it's not, I can come up with something, and that is a discussion that, the board would have to have, but.
New set of eyes. I'm just looking at it. I don't have the history
I know.
and the background. And I would, at your convenience, I'd love to get the copy of the procedures that do implement the policy regarding the
we can get those out.
professional services and the RFP schedule.
I don't remember which one it is, but I know there's one. I know we updated it since the time that I've been here, so recently, so we can get that.
Appreciate it.
Sheriff, when you, yes, Mark?
I'd like to just clarify something. The Booster Club and the foundation they're nonprofits, but they're private entities. they are affiliated with the institution in that they provide funding for certain aspects of the institution's scholarships and whatever, but they are private entities, and thus their records, notes, and whatever are not subject to the public records laws. So
That's why I thought it was odd to see them intermingled in our report as a public entity and that those would be released to the public. It
Well,
sort of makes them a quasi-private, quasi-public entities.
yeah, and I think one of the reasons for that, Trustee Banducci, is that they do fund scholarships, and the Booster Club does provide money, so it implicates Title IX, and it implicates other laws that relate to that.
And you're impacting athletes, yeah.
Do we have any other questions?
They do produce their own financial statements. That's what gets incorporated into our audit. We don't, our auditors do not do their audits. So it's,
Let me just make a sort of an editorial comment here. The whole concept of the audit is really a report of last year, and there's not much we can do to change it, and even accepting it is just really acknowledging that it's been made and it's part of our records. These discussions that we've had, I think, are very valuable discussions, and maybe we should put something on the agenda dealing with addressing the questions about should we continue to sponsor Area Agency on the Aging or Head Start if you want a more in-depth evaluation of those questions. But then we'll be able to get the people here who can answer those questions.
And that was my thought with Sarah, because I mean, I have questions like, why did scholarships go up this amount, or what's this mean, what's this collateralized securities, we did land purchase, those types of things. Granted, they're done, but for illumination going forward, I guess,
And hopefully for the edification of all of us, the staff and faculty have always been available to us to give us information as we go along so that we can make assessments of our judgments in terms of making policy. So I'm sure that Sarah would be happy to help you out with that, President Dunlap. Okay, thank you very much. Well, did you want to renew your motion?
And just for a point of clarification, Ron, is that I didn't know the dates of, and what was coming on. I had an overseas trip into South Africa at the time that we had our first meeting. So as part of the reading material they gave me the week before I left was this, and so I got a chance to go through it and just had a number of questions and went to our chairman and just says, I got some questions I'd like to do, and when I couldn't get the auditor to respond, he just said, we'll book it next week, and so the motion was made. Just I haven't found anything that I'm saying I disagree with. I would just like the opportunity to go through this, because this is the foundation for our annual budget for the next year and the next year and the next year. So I'd like to clearly understand this and then maybe come back with some recommendations.
I don't think that's any different than me coming here as a new person and wanting to understand what I'm getting involved in, so I completely understand.
And sorry for making you get on and off that truck.
that was a tall step.
Do you want to renew your motion?
I would like to renew my motion to see if we could postpone this until the next meeting.
Is there a second?
Meyer seconds it.
All in favor, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes, it'll be moved to, second reading will be moved to the next meeting. Next is tab number 2, the naming of Fort Sherman. Mark Browning. Mark.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, President Dunlap, Chief Counsel Lyons, Shannon. Just wanted to make sure you were all right over there. This is the second reading for the proposal to officially name the area directly behind this building. It's commonly known as Fort Sherman Park. In our work, in going through the records, we can find no record of official board action ever actually officially naming that area as Fort Sherman Park. As part of our work in the 9-point agreement with the Coeur d'Alene Tribe, We have endeavored to place a Coeur d'Alene name on a number of prominent places around campus. You notice when you come in the building here, there are rooms that have a Coeur d'Alene tribal name attached to them, as well as what would be commonly referred to as an English name. It is our intent through this action to name this area, and it's erroneously placed in direction as, I think it says west, and it's really probably more south, but it's the area directly behind this building here that's known as Fort Sherman Park. The proposal is to name that Chiemquet Park. And in working with tribal linguistic experts, historians and elders from the tribe, that word Chiemquet hails back to meaning at the headwaters. And in the history of this area, this physical area where we are at, the Fort Grounds area, is very sacred and special ground in Coeur d'Alene tribal history. It was and is a gathering place, and for many, many years and generations, tribes would come from throughout the region, from the Yakima, from the Nez Perce, from the Kalispel. They would gather here, and this place was regarded, this very spot where we're sitting is regarded as the Washington, D.C. of tribal times. This was the main seat where agreements were made between tribes. The name and naming that area at the headwaters has special significance for the Coeur d'Alene tribe, and would be a way to honor their heritage and our acknowledgement of what an indeed special place this is. And so it would be my recommendation in working with the folks at the Coeur d'Alene tribe. We have the unanimous endorsement of the North Idaho College Senate, thanks to John Totten's efforts there. They have endorsed this proposal as well, and we'd put it before you tonight for your adoption.
Do we have a motion?
Just a comment, sir, if that's okay.
If we could have a motion and a second, then we can discuss it.
Okay, then I put a motion that we accept the proposal of naming this in behalf of the tribe.
We have a second. All right, now, you have a discussion.
I'm blessed to have a factory on tribal grounds, and I got to know the tribal council, Chief Allen, Robert Matt, and the rest of the people there. I've watched what they've done to this community, the money they've donated to the Kroc Center, the money they donated to the Boys and Girls Club, the money that they donated to K-Tech, and their constant and continuous involvement of giving back to this community. So I think that it's a nice gesture, and I'm sure that they appreciate it. They're very humble people, and they don't expect it, so when we do it, it's the right thing to do. So I applaud this institution for moving this forward, Mark.
Any other comments? Judy?
Clarification, Mark, the name Fort Sherman Park remains? It goes away?
Mr. Chairman, Trustee Meyer, that name would go away. It would be solely named Chiemquet Park.
You're going to put up some phonetic clues for us here?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, yes, the sign design would say Chiemquet Park with, as you see in your materials, there's a multisyllabic word underneath that is the actual spelling in the Coeur d'Alene tribal language. I tried to play that once in an online Scrabble game, and it didn't take it, but it would have been worth a lot of points because it had a Q in there, so, and a W, so that would have been pretty good.
Well, if we rename the park, it may end up on the acceptable Scrabble list.
There you go. We might get that.
Any other comments?
Just to follow up then, will there be some interpretation with the naming that helps it to us all to understand and revere the area? Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Call for a vote then. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Now move to the new business. We have a first reading on reduction in force policy. John?
Mark, are you familiar with the QR codes? If we put a QR code on that sign, you could hear it then? Is another way to tell the story.
Thank you, John.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Board, President Dunlap, and all of you. I'm here as a representative from the College Senate and to support the first reading of the reduction in force policy. Before we get into any questions or process, I just really want to take a moment to thank all of the staff, faculty, and administration that have put countless hours into this process over several years. I'm fairly new to this process and have been involved with it only for the past 3 years, but it's my understanding that it's been going on much longer than that. So I just want to thank them, and specifically I want to thank Lori Olson-Horswell, Karen Ruppel, and Aaron Norville for supporting my preparation this evening in being able to answer any questions and moving this process forward. All I'll say is that the policy's been worked on for over 3 years, and that it began with a review of older policies, and a group of staff, faculty, students, administrators, and the board have spent a lot of time and decided that clarity was needed between evaluating a program for viability without the presence of a financial crisis and evaluating a program in the event of a financial crisis. This is something that I was asked to make very clear to you, that what you have before you is a draft focused strictly on the situation of financial crisis, not the former.
Do we have any questions or discussion? Judy?
Listening to your distinction then, is there some other policy somewhere that deals with the issue of when it's not a financial issue for reduction?
Not at this time that I know of. I know that.
Financial emergency.
Right.
Sorry, I'm mixing words. You said issue, but.
That's right. Please address it through the board so we don't interrupt each other. That's right.
So that was, well, I wanted to be sure to hear what you were saying, and for our board discussion, the draft we have before us, I think, focuses exclusively on the financial.
Mm-hmm.
That's my point at this moment, was to, because you've identified there are other times there might be a different circumstances where we need to do reduction and it was not financial, and at this time it doesn't sound like we have any way to deal with that. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Well, it looks like we're going to have to spend some time on this, some additional time, and so I would make a motion that we table this for now, have some discussion with President Joe Dunlap and his cabinet members, and maybe come back with some more directive from the board. And certainly appreciate all the efforts that have been made. Great place to start, but the board needs to spend some more time on this.
Is that a motion?
Yes,
Motion that we table it and return it to committee for further consideration?
yes.
Second.
Second it.
Any discussion?
I'd like to ask our president, is that something, I guess we don't get to ask you, you get to do it, if we like you, want you to do it anyway, but is that a reasonable request that with your experience, you can bring some more thoughts to what we're looking at here?
It is, and I think what we should include is guidance and timeline from the board to the committee so that they understand what the parameters are within which to develop that policy in terms of what should be included, what shouldn't be included, and that way the committee has clear guidance and a historical record of the development of that policy. I think one of the issues with this particular situation is that because of the time that it has taken, there is no historical record of what the initial guidance was. And so Mr. Totten's been working as best he can and probably would appreciate some very clear guidance in terms of what the expectations are. So I think that certainly is doable, and we owe it to those individuals that are working on it to provide that level of insight and guidance.
So do I hear a motion to amend the motion to add that the board will provide more specific guidance and a timeline of a certain amount of time for?
Yes, you do hear that.
I thought I did. Do we have
Go to the second.
Second, all right. So we have an amended motion that the matter be tabled and sent back to committee for further consideration, and that it be done with some specific written and maybe participatory assistance from the board, and there be a timeline of no longer than 6 months, shorter if possible. Is that your motion?
That's my motion.
And that's your second?
Wow, okay. Need a third for that one.
Yeah.
Based on that, is there discussion time?
Yes, if you got a second.
I'd second it, so now I can discuss?
Good.
Thank you. One of my thoughts was then 6 months. One of our goals as a board has always been to be sure that when we're developing these things, we do it in a timeline when the participants are on campus. And so 6 months from now would take us through the end of school. But 6 months doesn't mean we have to wait 6 months. You could come back sooner. Because it would feel to me like if we can get it done this next semester, so that by fall we start out with what we need, I would recommend that. And then how does this great guidance from the board reach this committee? When do we do the guidance ideas that we have? During this discussion or at the next meeting?
I think that the Board of Trustees needs to get together and find out how to do that. I'm thinking, as part of this discussion, I guess, that this particular situation sort of highlights maybe an issue where the board has not been as involved as it should have been in a very, very important policy. And we need to find a way, I think, to participate with the faculty and staff as you develop these things so that we're not just saying, bring it to us and then it's a take it or leave it situation after you've worked on it so hard. That's hardly fair. So I think the board needs to develop maybe a subcommittee of 1 or 2 board members that will be able to work with the committee or find some way to memorialize the collective board's desire in terms of the elements that should be contained within the reduction in force policy. And I think we need to, as a board, get together and do that as quickly as possible.
Mr. Chair, I suggest we do have a board retreat coming up, and maybe it'd be very good, a timely topic to discuss this.
And there again, to keep the timeline moving, in order to get our ideas into it enough that you can carry on, our retreat, I think, is scheduled early January. That would make, I would agree with that request. I came across some wording from another organization where the description was, when financial circumstances or changes of workload require, the board reserves the right to reduce forces in such a manner as it deems necessary. And that may be too heavy, but it was a start at saying there are lots of various reasons why that I guess we'll put into the hopper for the retreat time. And then can we ask our president to bring to us some ideas at the same time for?
I'll do that.
So is everybody clear on what the motion is?
You made it.
That's why I'm asking if everybody's clear on what the motion is.
Half Ken, half Christie.
Yeah.
Let me just restate the motion so that we can be clear on what it is. The motion is to table the present proposed reduction in force policy and send board direction in some form to the faculty and staff in terms of the elements that we would like to see considered in the reduction in force policy, and that we get a return of the proposal within 6 months, no longer than. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, it passes. John, thank you very much.
And Mr. Chair, could we make sure that, John, if you'd pass on to all the people that work so hard on this, that we do appreciate the framework, and we certainly will study it further and consider all of it.
And it will go forward. It's not going to die. It doesn't go in the black hole. That's the scary part.
The next agenda item is the board chair report. First element on there is considering moving the date of the January meeting. We presently have it set at a time when the entire board is scheduled to be in Boise for the legislative session. We have, so I would entertain a motion to move the January meeting from, I can't remember the date.
23rd.
From the 23rd to
30th.
the 30th. Anybody
I'll
got a-
make that motion.
Thank you. Got a second?
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes. The next element or item on the board chair's report is community engagement. And there are several items, there are several aspects of that I wanted to talk about. There has been some discussion in the past, and it never quite got to the operative stage, of trying to make sure that we reach out to the other communities within the North Idaho College service area, and that means Benoit boundary, all of the counties that we serve, all the 5 counties that we serve. We have all of our board meetings here. And it might be of some value if we can't, maybe once or twice a year, and I would propose maybe thinking about twice a year, hold a meeting, and it doesn't have to be the standard monthly meeting, it can be a special meeting, maybe to the southern end of the county, so that people who are affected by our participation down there or want to offer comments or participate in some of our meetings, they give them the opportunity to do that, and maybe one to the north at some point in time. And I would like to hear the board's feelings on it and discussion on that.
Well, speaking on my half, that was one of the things I said coming in, that I thought, as you look at a community that reaches out as far as this, it's a shame that we can't go see these people. And in places outside our community, the governor goes, does a capital for a day, and has managed to make it to the smallest of towns there and make them feel a part of what goes on in Boise. So I think this is an excellent opportunity for us to show our willingness to listen and be involved with these outside areas. So I think it's a great idea.
Any other comments or discussion, Judy?
You're saying meet elsewhere within the county or within the regional district?
Within the district, like potentially at the southern end of the county, find an appropriate meeting spot, not county, excuse me, of the district. All right. And same thing at the northern, maybe in Sandpoint or in Bonners Ferry, maybe in Benoit County, someplace, so.
Then a couple thoughts on that. Some taxpayers have said to, I'm sure other board members as well, since we county taxpayers are paying for the services here, why are you spending time or money outside the area? We've already touched on the economics of that upcoming issue, and will be an upcoming issue. Another aspect is, at least within the county, we could still be meeting outside of the Coeur d'Alene area. So that's why I wanted to distinguish. Within the county taxing district is one level, and as you say, the governor goes elsewhere, but all the citizens are part of that funding. Here at the community college, it's a different level. So I think as a board, we just need to think that through. And part of that also is, in other boards I'm on, the cost to take the whole dog and pony show is much more expensive than a special meeting saying, we're coming to visit with the community, hear what you're thinking, what your needs are, and how would you like to help fund what you want us to do? So there's some other ideas that I've learned along the way.
But Todd?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I like the concept also, like Judy, though, I do see where we might differentiate. Now, I'm going to split the middle of those two, though. By that, I mean, Sandpoint might make sense, even though it's out of our county, but because the facility we have there. Same with maybe like Kellogg, because we have something there. So the Benoit County one, that one I have a harder time maybe making that connection. So I don't know what that looks like, but somewhere that, yeah, we can strike a balance, talk about it.
Well, we have a footprint, excuse me, Mr. Chair, may I? We have a footprint in Plummer Worley, so maybe it would make sense to, as Judy said, not take a formal board meeting, but as Mr. Nielsen said, reach out in special meetings to our constituents. And then we could really go anywhere we wanted if it was just the board doing a special meeting.
All right, who drives the van?
Mr. Chair,
Judy?
we're now televised, so our board meetings now are available to folks who live within the Coeur d'Alene and/or, is it Cablevision? Obviously, we don't have any, so I don't know. How far do our televised meetings go now?
I don't know the answer. Mark, do you know?
Yeah, it's however far Channel 19 goes out into the county. It's broadcast on the public access channel, Channel 19. And Andy, do you by chance know how far that goes?
Yes, sir. We have Channel 19, which covers all of Coeur d'Alene, Hayden Lake, Rathdrum. We also are now setting up communications with Post Falls, cover Post Falls, and right to the state line to Liberty Lake.
Thank you, Andy.
But it doesn't really, sounds like it doesn't really, though, extend beyond the basic core geographic area here, though.
For those who get Channel 19.
Mark, did you have a comment?
See it in Athol?
Mr. Chairman, keep in mind that a number of folks watch these proceedings through the website, which is available anywhere to anybody who has web access. So.
So I guess I'm looking for a sense of the board in terms of whether or not we should explore number one, a special meeting, or having one of our regularly scheduled meetings away from this situs.
Mr. Chairman, I think it has merit. I would make a motion for that, to explore that.
Right, because, is there a second to that?
I'd make it, go ahead, Ron.
Yeah. If there's any further discussion?
This motion is including both special meetings and a board meeting?
I think we need to investigate what it would entail to try to do a regular board meeting. I think we could put them both on the table and try to evaluate what that cost and effort would require. I mean, maybe the special meeting may be where we end up, where it's the five of us literally jumping in a van and going to Kellogg or Standpoint. We might find that to be more efficient and make more sense. But I'd be open to it if there was a facility that we could go to. You know, maybe the Sandpoint facility has the capabilities and we could just jump in there and do like we do here.
We might be pleasantly surprised, Mr. Chairman, how many people in Sandpoint, given it's the first time there, the community people would be involved and get the education, see what we're doing, and I think it would be a great, you wouldn't want to call it a marketing tool, but a great opportunity for them to see that we recognize all of our geographical service areas. So I think it's a good idea.
And Mr. Chairman, it's also an opportunity for us to hear from the community. To me, that's as important as
No question.
where their needs are. And yes, having toured the Sandpoint facility, that's already in place to do that. And if it could be televised in the Sandpoint area, maybe that can be part of a logistics we explore.
So, all in favor of exploring the opportunity to have either a special or regular scheduled meeting in areas remote from our present situs?
Aye.
Aye.
In favor? All opposed? So what I'm going to ask you, Mr. President, is if you would explore the opportunities for us to have either a special or regularly scheduled meeting locations within our service area and come back to us with a proposal.
Will do.
Mr. Chair, I'd ask that those tours be done in summertime or spring and fall weather.
Okay. The next item that I would like to talk about under community engagement is similar in many ways, but it doesn't require, I don't think, necessarily a motion. But we've talked in the past about members of the Board of Trustees assisting our community, our local community particularly, in understanding not just the board's role, but what the college does for our community by going out to service clubs on occasion, accepting or soliciting actually speaking engagements to local service clubs so that we can carry the message of NIC as board members out to the community at large. And I know we've talked about that, but I'm going to try and encourage all of us to, first of all, we'll make a list of the service clubs and we'll maybe take some assignments and try and set up some engagements so that we get an opportunity to go out and promote NIC. Our president does a great job of that, but that shouldn't all fall on his shoulders. And so I will be getting back to each of you to do that. And I know I've talked to you before about it, and there seems to be universal acceptance of that idea. So,
Mr. Chair, and I have had an opportunity by invitation to do that. And I can tell you the annual report was a great tool to use. And so when we get our hands on that, that'll help us tremendously.
And then let me report that we did have a meeting with the other community college trustees, chairs, and the presidents 3 days ago, and we discussed several elements that we were mutually interested in, the accountability study or accountability program that President Dunlap discussed and described to you a little bit ago. But also the idea of out-of-county fees. It is becoming an issue not just in Kootenai County, because Kootenai County residents are saying, we pay property taxes and you're extending educational opportunities out into the 5 northern counties, the 4 other northern counties. Those students get in-state tuition. And we're subsidizing that. That's what the members of Kootenai County say. And they're right. And that doesn't just occur here in the northern district. That occurs also with the other community colleges. And so we have a mutual desire to try and find some equitable way of making sure that those students from the out-of-county areas that are inside the service area will have maybe a more equitable way of subsidizing the students from their areas. We're working on that project, and I mention that now only because it is a complicated issue, extremely complicated. It involves potentially other new legislation. It requires looking at the processes that are used by our sister community colleges, which are financed somewhat differently at this point in time. One of them is anyway. And so we're going to be working on that and it's a number one item for all of us, because I think everybody understands that it's an issue that has to be resolved, and we're not going to move away from it. There are other issues that come before the community colleges jointly, and I got to tell you that we have received an awful lot of appreciation from our legislators about the unified way in which the community colleges in this state join together on mutual issues, try and find some mutual solution, and then take it to the legislature so that they can arrive at some kind of a solution to the problem. They do not get that kind of cooperation from the four-year institutions. And so we are in a unique position because of the cooperation that's been developed, and largely because of the huge efforts by our president and the presidents of the other colleges to move that process forward. And so you will hear from time to time, hopefully, a report on what the elements are that we're considering jointly amongst the community colleges. And I think that concludes. Oh, I had one more item. During January 23rd, the joint boards of trustees from all three community colleges will be meeting in Boise in connection with a legislative trip down there that we're going to have to visit with the legislators. We're also going to engage in a joint seminar put on by ICRIMP, which is the insurance agency that insures most of the governmental entities in the state of Idaho, for educational purposes, but also we'll have a joint meeting at that time. So that's all I have.
Mr. Chair, a question on that then, while you're on those dates. For our planning purposes, we usually, as a board, go when our president speaks to JFAC and attend that hearing, which is Tuesday morning, the 22nd. I think we're third on the agenda, but it's helpful to go hear the other community college presidents, what they're telling. And so if it works to remind all the fellow board members to be able to be in Boise by, essentially it ends up Monday night, you can't get down there Tuesday morning early enough. We would need to be in Boise then by Monday night. And that's why I was backing up to what I heard the student program is that Monday when you all get together. Is there any role for the board in that? Should we be there, should we not be there?
Mr. Chairman, Trustee Meyer, absolutely you are welcome. Monday is the community college luncheon with the legislators at noon at the old spaghetti factory on Main. Love to have your presence there. It is one of the best attended events in terms of sheer numbers of legislators and in terms of delivering the message.
That's my question. Legislators are there to hear about community colleges.
To hear from the community colleges. The students are there. The students make a presentation. We take the students to the Capitol in the morning and introduce them to different committee chairs and to different legislators. In addition, Mr. Chair, to your JFAC presentation with President Dunlap Tuesday morning, we are tentatively set to present to the Senate Education Committee Tuesday afternoon and House Education Committee Wednesday morning. Yes, sir.
So we're headed out either Monday sometime or Sunday night, but probably coming home Wednesday evening? Is that kind of the plan?
Right. Let me suggest, what we'll do is we'll have the president put together a little calendar of events so that you can then make your travel arrangements, knowing the times of the various appointments that we're going to be involved in.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, Judy, do you know what the early morning flight is? Is it still 6?
About 8:30 now?
There's a 6 o'clock.
Is it? Well, check, January's been changing, so.
Mr.
yeah.
Chairman, may I ask a question? Mark, if I may, sir. So it sounds like it would be beneficial if we could join y'all at lunch, but it sounds like maybe the morning, the students have their own thing, and that, so if we're traveling in the morning, but we're there in adequate time to join you for lunch, that'd be appropriate.
Mr. Chair and Trustee Banducci, we'd love to have you for lunch. If your travel can't get you there until the afternoon or that evening, that's fine. Because really, Monday at the lunch it is really about the students and the legislators. Just in general, it would be more of a minor role for the trustees, although I'm sure attendance would be appreciated, absolutely.
And the flights there's one at 8 something in the morning and one at 4. 6 is it now? It's been changing, I know, so we'll have to look and see.
And, Mr. Chair, I was really hoping to lock this board into attendance Monday night to the Human Rights
Oh,
Day.
boy.
And so I will be there.
Is that here?
Yeah. And so I'll take the 6 a.m. flight.
There isn't one. I don't think there is one now.
Joe thought there was.
Yes.
Still? Well, we'll figure that out.
Flight from here to Boise.
On Southwest?
No, it's Alaska.
Via Seattle.
Well, we'll be able to make our travel arrangements, hopefully, once we know where we have to be and when we have to be there, so. Any other discussion? Okay, any remarks for the good of the order? If there are none, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.